Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 19th episode in the Bringing Light to the Darkness series. I am Rebecca Rose. Thank you for joining me again. And here in Alaska, we are kind of finishing up with summer, but we're still having quite a bit of daylight. We come through the 24/7 daylight and moving into some actual darkness at night, which is so lovely. Um, I always like to bring you that through my screensaver because, Alaska and the far north are just so um, superlative or epic, we could say. So I've thought about like, what would it be like to have a conference up here and would people actually come? I mean, it's accessible from Seattle. So anyway, thank you all for joining me for the 19th episode in this series. And also for enjoying the beginnings of my interview series, Starseeds Speak. And I've got a couple people on deck coming on here in September. And yeah, just things are really growing. I also have the Awakening course, 10 weeks live with me here on video. Starting September 19th, we run Thursday evenings for 10 weeks. And I have the link below for that if you want to join us. There's still room in that. I'm really excited about that. People have been asking me for a long time if I would teach live. And if you ever do sessions with me one-on-one, you know that I am not on camera because I read best without the video. So it'd be nice to have everybody on FaceTime together and creating a bit of an interactive community through that course. So what are we going into today? From super soldier to superhuman. This is an exploration of how full feeling returned to me and moving from separation consciousness on the planet with using some very personal examples into more unified field. And how do we get there? Yeah, this is especially like a passionate topic for me because of given all that I've been through. Um, it matters. These things matter really so much to me. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I'm going to go into some Mars stuff entwined with the conversation. There's bits around the programs, and I want to start here on Earth, however, with my experiences early in the summer. Some of you know I left my beautiful Alaska to go to the southern southern hemisphere for quite a while, actually. And what was I doing there? It was a sort of clandestine mission. Yeah, didn't speak too much about that to anybody, but this is sort of a springboard, or we could say a portal into the larger discussion today. And I'd been to Australia. I'd been there probably, God, it was probably 20 years ago, but it wasn't new to me. But again, going into my dating life, I'd met somebody that I really enjoyed, and it was, really good in my system. Met him, and we had sort of been courting online for like, I don't know how many months, 4 months or so. And then we decided to meet in person. So I went to see him. It was really beautiful for the first week and a half or so. And then disaster struck. We're all human. We all have our stuff. And what I realized is he was just terrified of emotional intimacy and being with somebody. It's so easy through the screen of the internet to, it's safe to become close, right? To be a little bit vulnerable about things we don't really care about. But he kind of had a meltdown. And I could see, and here's one of the things I know to ask. Oh, were you married? What were your significant relationships in the past, and how have you healed? What did you learn? If you're you're dating, you're vetting somebody, and you need to ask these questions, right? So he really hadn't healed from a marriage that was 15 years on. It's this long past, but these things, of course, they stick around. They stick around, and that's not to single him out as different from the rest of us somehow, but just I'd like to speak from my own personal examples and personal life and allow myself to be vulnerable. I like to model vulnerability because it's one of the things that gets us out of separation and into unity. Yeah, he said, I had it. We woke up one morning and he said, turn to me. And he didn't want to tell me this. And I could tell it was heavy on him. And he'd been really distant the days leading up to this, and he just said, you know, my guides in the dream time said we should probably just be friends. We should probably just be friends. I have a lot of feelings for you, but we should just be friends. And I know there was a lot of feeling, and that was what was so terrifying. And I feel like feeling is our superpower, and we're all here to learn to work with that so that we can take our planet back. And in fact, the feeling of love for most of us can be the most terrifying of all, and such was the case for him. Again, not singling him out, but really wanting to speak from my own experience. That's what makes everything poignant. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not here to share the sordid details of my love life, but but by happenstance, I don't mind sharing those things, because who hasn't? Every single one of us here has love relationship, has had, or is seeking that. That's part of the human kaleidoscope of experience that ultimately we're here to explore. I'm sure of that. Sure that I'm also here to explore that, and I'm always learning things. Um, Even if we could say the relationship didn't work out, um, I learned a lot. And coming back into deeper self relationship, I think, has been a big part of that. Deepening, deepening, deepening in authenticity with myself, and so on and so on. We'll get into things relevant to the programs. If we look at the programs, what are the programs doing? Trauma-based mind control at its heart is about dividing we could say the victim from him or herself, so that there is no self home. There is no relationship with self. And thus begins the sort of decay of our um, union and unity here on the planet. I'll speak very personally to that. With him, yeah, he also hit some trigger points for me, because he did become very, very volatile and unpredictable. And this is the fearful avoidant attachment in action that I witnessed. Some of you know that I'm really geeky about, attachment theory and healing my own attachment system and becoming more and more secure in my attachment. It's one of my big wins that I'm continuing to work on. And I'm, like I said, going into this because it's a personal segue into like how separation consciousness has taken hold to such a degree on our planet, making us fearful of the things that we most want, which is love, love with the other, to feel loved and to love, to be loved. Yeah, it's not the training of a super soldier. And it's not our training mostly as we come into this world. We're trained to become productive citizens, cogs in the wheel of the matrix. And hopefully, through the work we're doing, we're becoming more sovereign and more authentic as we go. Yeah. Yeah. And when I pause and think of my Aussie man, a dear man, really wonderful star-seeded soul, just wounded like so many of us, right? It's so much about so much about how that fear-based programming takes hold, and how it I think I want to say that it creates a smaller and smaller and smaller box for us to live in, until we feel like we're living in a cage. I mean, I could see that in him and have seen that in him since we parted ways. Yeah. So we're here to undo that. And I speak, from the template of a woman seeking love with a man here in ordinary reality, and also as a former weaponized super soldier, an asset for secret programs. Um, yeah. Yeah, in love relations, for sure, all this old trauma and wounding invert the heart frequencies, yeah, and amplify division, which is where they want us. So I think our love relationships have been especially targeted by the controllers and by the programmers of mass culture, and all the social engineering is really geared to keep us away from ourselves and keep us away from each other. And so it's a bit of what we're talking about today, with kind of threaded through with my program experiences, and how we heal from that. At the end, I'll be taking you through more of a guided experiential journey um, to work with that live together. I think that would be kind of nice. Yeah. Yeah, we are here tasked with more of opening our hearts rather than shutting them. So, and everybody can relate to that, our wanting to like stay safe and protected, not be vulnerable, and to, in my case, for many years, I think pushing other people away, just as he did. You know, can you relate to any of this? Are you human? You could probably relate to this. Um, yeah, and tell me about that. If you feel moved to, give a soundbite of that to us in the comments, we'd love to hear. Yeah, it's again really something everyone can relate to. Yeah. I think I've talked about that. I have on my notes, what is the cost of all this on our planet? It's killing us. Yeah, being lost from love of self and love of the other. We all need this. Like so many of my client sessions, I see people who want to know how to, get back an old flame, twin flame, or, where's my, excuse me, where's my counterpart? Or working out some kind of relationship conundrum. This is part of the work that we do in session, and whether it's something kind of galactic or very earth based or otherwise, it's a big part of what we spend our mental real estate. We're thinking about it a lot, right? Or if you're in a relationship and there's bumps, of course there's wobbles. That's part of working with that as part of relationship in a healthy relationship. Yeah, and certainly we can look to, why am I so impassioned about this? Yes, the programs, but let's get more granular. The twinning program with Dean, and if you've watched my videos, you know about Dean and the twinning and how we were sent to Mars together and trauma bonded in horrific, hideous ways that were completely dehumanizing and incredibly violent. Yeah, I mean, at the level of crimes against humanity, for sure. And if you don't know about that story, I'll go back and look at the 10th video in the Bringing Light to Darkness series. That kind of details in a very complete and rather, I would say probably graphic way, what happened to me and how we were twinned and why. It was part of the weaponization process and part of the dehumanization process for us before we could be soldiers on Mars used as assets in the secret space program. And we know too, they caged us, they forced us to abuse each other, forced us to betray each other, um, and made us go on missions as killers, moving us through our programming beyond our sentience as humans, beyond our fear, beyond our the beautiful sentience that we have as humans was deleted from the record, so to speak, as we became more and more augmented and more, we could say technologically, chemically, biologically, psychically altered. You're made to be fearless, in a sense, and somehow to retain the human bond, not in a healthy form, in a traumatized state. And eventually, in the end, you also know they had him kill me. So why is it extra important that I be tending this work and tending this flame for humanity now? There's maybe a kind of poetic justice inside of it, that those who are weaponized become full feeling again. And those who are cut off from their feeling and made to be slaves in a system like this, which is all of us. We don't have to look at me in the programs to look at how we've been all, in a way, quite manipulated by lies, deception, and malintent. So over and over, I say we're here to undo that, and to undo that together is even more potent than doing that work alone. Yeah. So giving a little pause. Whenever I go into the twinning, I kind of have to have a little pause. It's also been a busy week. I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, it looks like a child wrote them. But that's how I am with my journals. They're all like colored markers. Integrating my child aspect. Yeah. So yeah. And to say too that, we talk about attachment theory, which I've talked about on other videos in the last year, is something I'm super passionate about, because my attachment system was so fucked coming out of the excuse my language, yes. The family that I came out of with, my mother with dissociative identity disorder and addiction, violence, sexual abuse, and all these things, like, attachment is just scary. So I can understand my Aussie man's conundrum. Yeah, it can be so scary. And I feel like, God, we got to reclaim this. And to the extent that I'm now enrolled in a certificate program with for integrated attachment theory, I'll be a coach, officially a coach with that, those modalities, working with the subconscious mind and healing all these programs. And so we can really love again and be in conscious union with the other. So you'll be able to book sessions with that. And if you want to just chat about those things in a single session now, not having to wait for a session package to be available, you can always book a soul council session through my website. And that link is also below. But I thought you guys would get a kick out of that. What is she up to now? It's funny because I have such a good gig, like I don't need to add extra modalities. I feel like I'm filling a niche that not everyone can fill. But adding sort of where our hearts go, we have to follow, right? Like if there's a passion for something, go with it, see what happens, because the next step leads you, I talk about this in sessions and coaching, like one step leads to the next and leads to the next. And we don't always know where it will lead, but it will lead you where you need to go. When it's a heart calling or heart passion, like that's the journey. We just have to trust it. So I thought you'd enjoy that share. Yeah. So how we connect and bond and attach to others changes our world so completely more than anything else. And it's all, these are all solvable problems. I think that's all what I'm also bringing to the talk today to you guys, that these are solvable things. It's all solvable. We are incredibly resilient. We are able to heal, and we are able to take the planet back. So and primarily what I've observed in my own journey is that it's the division from self that we start to heal first. So if you want to heal anything external, you start with what's inside. Work within to see external results, right? Work within to see external results. That's really the medicine. And like I said, with my Aussie guy, and the aftermath of that these months is like rehabilitating my relationship with self. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go on, but like I've come into a deeper and deeper self-love, self-care, self-awareness, self-knowing. It's ever deepening, which is like this unfathomable, almost like a bottomless well. We contain the universe, so we're always going to be exploring our inner depths to know this external world, what we believe to be external. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to that. So much to that. I'm really into self-work, self-growth, self-development. And I can see, people say to me, Rebecca, oh my God, but if I look at your first video and where you are now, it's like, who are you? You're totally different. I'm like, yeah, and that's what we're here to do, is transform. You can see it in, 19 videos over 4 years, what's happened. So, it's incredibly inspiring, right? Inspiring. I mean, inspiring that I've been able to unlock so much within myself, from considering other avenues I might have gone down into a dark hole. I did that for a long time. I mean, but I hope you feel inspired on your own journey to continue and to not feel alone, and we can see, division in every community, everywhere through the world. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that's true right now. We can also see a lot of beautiful acts of loving kindness. One thing I would say too is like the division, and I've experienced firsthand in the past year and a half, division and narrative control, and a lot of ego and deception in the disclosure community. I hate to say that, but it caused me to take more than one step back, probably like 10 steps back from that. And again, it all comes back to relationship with self. If we're fractured within, we're going to bring that to our external reality. And that's not to single out the SSP or disclosure communities at all, but just an example of the sort of the macrocosm. And I think that, we're part of that paradigm shift every time we're bringing a higher frequency of love, compassion, empathy, kindness, understanding. We're beginning to shift that. It's not like fighting against something we don't want, but what do we want to model here? And like I said at the beginning, like I want to, for example, in what I talk about and how I speak about things on the channel is like I always want to be modeling vulnerability because I think that's such an important trait to help us get out of where we are, where we've been, and into higher ground, higher frequency. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. I have to stop and read all my pretty marker pen notes here. Yeah, I think I've covered this. Wow. It is really about healing relationship with self. And what's your experience with that? I'd like to hear about that in the comments. So, is this making sense to you? Mm, yeah. There's hope. I think that's what I'm saying is there's so much hope. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, everything, well, I'll read this verbatim. Everything we're seeing in the world around us can be transformed through, yeah, self-tenderness, self-kindness, self-care. We could talk about self-love. That's a bit of a buzzword that can shut people down. I don't want to be too cliche, but there is that. Yes, self-love. Yeah, because it undoes all of that, the frequency of that unbinds the matrix programming. So we can't be slaves on a prison planet anymore. When we're no longer at war with ourselves, the planet is liberated. And I mean the war within, the war within. Like when I exited the programs, I hated myself to the point where I didn't want to live here anymore. I didn't want to be here in this reality and I wanted to die. And part of that's programming, the suicide programming. And I was hospitalized for a long time. I think I've talked about that a bit. Yeah, that was 30 years ago. Come a long way. But that's part of, that's an extreme example of how we're kind of programmed to be subtly, a different way, a gentler way to talk about that would be like, there's always a narrative within you that I'm not quite good enough. I'm not worthy of XYZ. I'm not worthy of love, or whatever it is, the narrative that kind of keeps us stuck and small and hidden and withdrawn. Um, yeah, those inner kind of core wounds. Mm. Yeah, we too, we know that a planet filled with yeah, loving, respectful relationships and interactions looks really different from this. And can you feel that? How would that feel to be surrounded with loving people, engaged in loving interactions? What's that like in your system? Do you like that? Very different from this. Yeah. So healing inside brings us to that. Yeah. And we'll come back to the nuts and bolts of healing. The how the fuck do we get there? The programming to hate ourselves is really big, whether you not you or sent to Mars as a super soldier, or we're just living in this ordinary reality. I mean, we all volunteered to be here. That's my view. We didn't come here by mistake. We came here because we were resourced for the path, knowing that we were going down into a difficult place. That said, our world is full of beauty. You have beauty around you wherever you live. It doesn't have to be Alaska. I'm partial to the north, but there is so much beauty inside of us. First and foremost, if we want to look at the inner war, we also have to look at the inner peace, the inner beauty, the inner love, the inner joy. And those are all in us waiting to be tapped. They're not finite resources, they're infinite and they are intact. It's like cleaning the glass. You kind of just have to do a little gentle scrubbing off. And things are available to us again. Yeah. So we'll come back to that shortly. But I want to underscore too that our hearts and our sentience are a superpower. The title of this, from super soldier to superhuman, I would say superhuman is to be fully sentient. Because that was really taken from me. And I think for a lot of us, it's been taken. We've been preyed upon in our sentience. When I look at the grays on the moon, for example, in the labs, in Dulce, in abduction stories that are all over my client sessions, some varieties of gray, we're very interested in what? Not just the human endocrine system, human sexuality, but Human sentience. What is it like to feel? Is it an asset or isn't it? It is a superpower, and we need it to take our planet back. Yeah. And again, like the Germans on the moon, back in the labs, there were grays there as well. No, their experiments were involving like the removal of certain aspects of sentience to some of the upper dimensional beings that they had there in captivity, like beings in cages. Cages and imprisonment are such big themes here. And my job when I was little, they were taking me back and forth to the moon when I was still small, before I was taken into the time and back, a long time and back, 20 back with the began on Mars with Dean. It seemed to go on and on and on. But my training with the Draco particularly involving this was at the moon base with the Germans, was kind of, it was like taking a snapshot of these beings' DNA with my mind, and they were training me to be have a photographic memory at the DNA level. And the training went on and on and on, and that's why I was taken out so many times there. But it was, the purpose was to gather, a data set. So they have a database of all things that were quite organized, but also to remove certain qualities that were too sentient for the lab experiments. So it's like they want to take the psi ability, but take out all the lovingness for it. Just as just an example, take out the heart and what we call the heart and the sentience and the loving part, and the part that's cares for another and is concerned about the welfare of good and the welfare of the community, the welfare of society, or these kinds of things. They would want to take those qualities out of the experimental beings, hybrids, and things that they were in the clones they were creating. Oh, we don't want that. So yeah, it's going back to that for a moment. And oh yeah, programming aside, that we could say the sub-programming aside of that for me as a small person was to blame myself, hate myself for what I was doing. I was very successful. So there's a mind control involved in that, which is like, I hate what I'm doing and therefore I hate myself and I can't stop doing this because I'm programmed to do this. It's catch-22, no win situation for a child who's been mastered in this way. Yeah. It's kind of a psychic recon in a way, because you're going in not into a place in space-time, but into a being, gathering information and leaving. You're stealing their information, distorting it, replicating it, and creating more beings that will be distorted. The farther down the line that goes, the more the distortion is amplified, like a gene anomaly. It's going to become amplified the farther down it's duplicated. So what's happening when we hate ourselves? It's disrupting relationship with self. Relationship with self will never be complete. And that's the idea of many of these sort of devious programs, is that even once they stop being your jailer, you will continue on being your own jailer, because the programming is so indelible. Yeah. I'm glad I've come far from this. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we can see, like I always say, we don't have to look at my experiences in the programs, although that's kind of what the series is about, right? The SSP and Montauk and these programs. And bringing light into them, by the way. Yeah, we don't have to look that far to see how we've been manipulated. And I've made that point, but bringing it home, because I think it motivates us to take our power back. So we kind of like get jolted out of our status quo reality from day to day, have a sense of, oh, is this what I want? Am I operating in a way that I would like to be operating in this world? And if not, what do I need to shift to get there? Because the power is within me, right? You know that the power is within you. The force is in you. The force is in you. Yeah, I mean, I would say the super soldier program is a kingpin of all of the derelict sort of monstrosities, really. I might be partial, not sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It kills our heart and kills love and kills self-relationship and capacity to feel. And thinking about that too, with the Germans and the Draco and the Greys and the hybrid labs, wanting to remove stuff, removing sentience. We absolutely know, proof positive, that those things are superpowers. Otherwise, they wouldn't want them removed. Superpowers for us as humans, not superpowers as far as, if you want to master a slave, you don't want it to have too much self-authority. But it's a superpower for us, for sure. Yeah, think about it that way. Yeah. Mm. And I feel like we have to must never lose our capacity to feel. Must feel, must feel. Yeah. And doing the challenging work of showing up for ourselves over and over and over again. To feel and to heal and to become who we truly are here, to be authentic, to be real. Yeah. And to be in love with the lives we've been given on this beautiful planet. Yeah. Mm. A lot moving in me around all this today because I feel, even though I'm not like going deeply into like program memories, it's all like I feel like I'm swimming in it at the moment. Yeah. Not in a bad way, but just in a way of remembering. My life is busy and I don't always spend the time that, there's many other things to do other than swim in the morass of these things. Yeah. And again, I would say 1,000-fold, there's the calling in me to speak to these topics is really strong and powerful and impassioned because of where I've been. So I will take all this back and take other people with me to take it back, so that we're all empowered to help each other take back the planet. Yeah. Yeah. And it does involve the heart. It really does involve the heart. We're talking about feeling is a superpower. The heart is certainly our greatest asset. I mean, look at, if you do a session with me one-on-one, I'm reading down through your energy field and certainly through the chakras. That's where I, gather all the information through the field, through the chakras and looking at everything psychically. And heart has so much resonant vibration. And it's so connected to, I see that it's almost like points of light that tether out into, the cosmos and galaxy and star systems and all this. Um, it's the most, what are the words? I don't know if I have human language for it. It's massive, can move mountains. Yeah. Yeah. And sadly, bringing back, sorry, my Aussie guy, bringing it back to him, like he was so afraid of feeling. And that's just one example of millions. There are millions of men and women, myself included, in the past, particularly afraid of feeling, afraid of intimacy, afraid of love, afraid of loving, afraid of being loved. What will this do to me? I will be destroyed if I'm loved. Boy, if that doesn't sound like a program, I don't know what does, right? Does that sound like a program to you? Have we been manipulated? Yes, absolutely. We've been manipulated to not look inside the heart anymore and to be afraid of what it contains, especially so we won't come into our relationships with ourselves and our counterparts. We need those counterpart relationships, or we could say twin flame relationships, to take back our planet as well. We can see the weaponization of that twin flame relationship with Dean and I, one example of many, right? It's programming. It's programming. Yeah, I feel like we would be eating out of their hands, right? If we weren't talking about this straight on, head up, no chaser, right? Like, like looking at it very directly, right? Naming it, calling it what it is, and then working to undo it and enjoying the ride while we undo it. Yeah. And vulnerability too being a real big piece of how do we come back to ourselves? I think it's being willing to be vulnerable with ourselves and to look at our own stuff, to feel what we feel, to be present with ourselves. It requires a lot of courage at this point in our trajectory where we're kind of constantly wired into, like, you know, I have like this watch that he gave it to me actually. It helps me track my sleep. I have some sleep issues. And it helps me it shows me what my nervous system has been doing throughout the night as well as during the day, which is actually pretty handy. But like we're like definitely wired into all this stuff going on all the time. It takes a real amount of, I would say, sovereignty and self-awareness to drop down in, like I do every morning, meditation, and in the evening. What's going on? Pay attention to the open space and the internal space, And it can be vulnerable because we don't know what we're going to find. That's way more exciting than any social media post because you don't know what you're going to get. What's going to come up in the feed? I don't fucking know. And there's so much, there's veins of gold to explore, and like pearls and rubies and, diamonds. That's what spills forth. Some of it might be painful, but we're resilient and we're made to feel. And when we allow what we've been kind of avoiding, like my guy, like, hey, your old marriage wants to be healed, all that stuff, that baggage stuff that's been weighting you down, it wants to heal, come on. Or like me and my program stuff for many, for decades, right? Like just facing it. You need to face it and work with it and learn to befriend yourself. It's doable. It's a workable situation. I promise. Yeah. So when we go in and talk about healing, yeah, vulnerability as our secret weapon. And it starts with really befriending ourselves. And yeah, yeah. Within the vulnerable, the open and the sincere, no lies can hide. I did write that down. It's rather poetic. I write things late at night. And sometimes I have to reread it and go, oh, wow, that's interesting. It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, our world is full of deception, and we change that via a luminous transparency that begins with the self. Yeah. And when we are in interaction with another, whether it's our intimate or somebody else, whoever, a friend, a family member, a client, transparency. When we really show up, and also active listening when we're hearing the other. Because we're regulated within ourselves enough to be present for another, not just for our own narrative. We can step outside ourselves a little bit, or maybe a little bit more, and hear somebody else's perspective or point of view or their need or their feeling. It's also massive in how we become healthy. Yeah. And also like being able to model what we want to see in the world. It might also be a little bit cliche, but to be that tenderness that we like, that softness that we want to experience in the world, that love, that kindness, that ability to hear another perspective, make room for something else, even if it's unfamiliar. There's a lot in that. There's a lot to learn from. And these are ancient teachings. They're not new. Just having reminders today. And tending the relationship with self. Yeah. Tending the relationship with self. And that's really the primary blueprint for changing the world. Yeah, that's really radical. It's totally radical. Totally radical work. Totally radical. Yeah. And also talk about more specifically healing. And I learned this, and we're working a lot with this. And this is part of how we shift our relational patternings in making what is invisible, visible. That is working with the subconscious mind. And for me, in this case, working heavily in the aftermath of my Aussie guy, letting him be nameless, healing my subconscious comfort zone and getting out of my, we could say the comfort zone of pain or the programming for pain. So let me see if I can explain this in a way that's linear, that makes sense, and that is concise. Working with the subconscious mind, and our subconscious comfort zone, I feel, is sort of the conditioned relationship that we have with ourselves. So I was heavily programmed in certain directions, and we're all programmed through our experiences. It doesn't have to be formal, nefarious programming that was done in some underground dungeon, but we're programmed through our experiences to lean in certain directions, for example, with our attachment system. But for me, I was hardwired to pain through various situations in my natal family and then through the programs, to the point where I had such a high pain tolerance, is almost like craving it, like a drug. Or we could say, at the very least, discomfort as comfort. I'm used to trauma, I'm used to chaos, I'm used to what feels uncomfortable, to the point that it becomes, ironically, and sort of like very inverted and twisted, it becomes comfort. Because it's what I know, it's what's familiar, right? Can you guys think about a time when that was true for you? We gravitate back to what we know. In this case, I would say gravitating to somebody at some subconscious level I knew would not be available to me. He would be an avoidant in attachment, in his attachment style. He had a hard leaning, dismissive, avoidant side that was going to come in and go, no, shutting this down. This is too vulnerable. I'm leaving. End of. You want to be friends, that's awesome. That's what I love. If you want to be in a situationship, friends with benefits, that'd be even better. But right? Oh, no. But avoidance, it would be a situation that ultimately would cause me pain. And so I gravitated toward it without really realizing it consciously, because he was definitely a mark up from anybody I've been with so far, probably in recent times. Yeah. And a really gentle soul in his strong masculine as well, but a lot of, psiability in these things. He'd had like death stuff as he was a kid, and he had light family that was always coming in. He'd had a few NDEs. One was as he was a child, and one was having heart surgery in his, when he was like 40. And the light team comes in and says, "Do you want to go now?" Because he's dying. He's dying on the operating table, and they're saying, "Do you want to leave?" And he says, "No." And I said, "You have a job to do here." When he told me these stories, I said, "You have a job to do here. What is it?" He said, "I don't know." I'm like, "Well, good goddamn, it's time for you to figure it out. Or are you going to stay in this quagmire?" Anyway, this is subconscious comfort zone for pain and suffering. Oh, that was me. I moved out of that by intentionally, actively attuning my system repeatedly, daily, to states of pleasure, goodness, and ease. It has to be a daily practice. I think it takes something like 21 days to rewire the subconscious mind. When the subconscious speaks in the language of images and emotion, not words, not linear language. Forget it. The subconscious does not know that language. So not words. But when you repeat something, an image coupled with feeling, just bring to your awareness something that feels really good. Maybe someone hugging you that you feel good and safe and snuggy with. Just a fun example. This is what comes to mind for me. And you started to tune in with that. How does that feel? What's the visual image? What's the sensation through the body? Do you feel safe? Really feel about that now. Feel about that. You might take a deep breath because your parasympathetic nervous system is activating, bringing you out of that sort of more hectic state into a very sweet, restful state. You see that? When you keep doing that day after day, attune with that, attune with that, attune with that, pleasure, goodness, and ease, or we could say love, you will be massively reprogramming your whole internal system. Sounds simple. They don't want you to know it can be that simple. Because you have to apply yourself to it. You can't just do it once or twice. You have to keep doing it. Book a session with me and we can work on it together. It's powerful. because you're creating new neural pathways. If we look at programming, like when I was at Montauk and they had me, oh God, strapped into, like immobilized, strapped into this chair and reclined, and had that, it's not a chronovisor, it's not looking into the future, but it was like, uh, there was all of these violent images being flashed inside my visual field to my eyes, different on the left, different on the right, programming me. And it was all violence and like killing and just horrible things that were going on and on and on and flashing a light in these other symbols and codes in the other eye. It's programming you over and over to kind of be in a fear state. Of course, that's an extreme example. You can just turn on the news if you want to do that. I mean, you can just turn on the Weather Channel. I mean, it's all fear, the latest catastrophe in the Southeast, or, like, oh my goodness. Um, so we're programmed in lots of ways, overt and covert. You know this. And so we think about that when you really feel about it and you couple it with imagery, it's going to create outcomes, whether they're positive or negative. And if you're, a nefarious being in the programs, a mastermind in the programs, or if you're Mengele in his experiments in Auschwitz with the twins, you're going to take that and do certain things. You're going to go in a certain direction. It's not going to be up, it's going to be down. But we can take it to work with ourselves. And I don't like the word reprogram, but we could say recondition or reattune to something more benevolent that you are choosing, not someone else. And that's how we can begin to gather our goodness back to us. Yeah. And it's working for me because I would say I'm gathering to me a lot of really beautiful people and situations. Like things are changing because, through our energy field, we're communicating a call and response with the universe at all times. I'm doing that right now, right? And so as we vibe at a certain level, whatever that vibration contains, we're going to magnetize it. If it's full of fear and panic and pain and suffering, we're going to draw more to us. If it's full of calm, peace, care, compassion, tenderness, vulnerability, abundance, we draw that to us and we emanate it. We put that out in the world and we get it back. Yeah. So I would say pain is no longer pleasurable. That was also the programming within SRA, the kernel, likewise at Montauk. Terrible, terrible things there. Literally, we were being programmed, the small children, were being programmed, again, through hideous violence, so that pain would be our pleasure zone. Takes a long, long time when it's been so hardwired in to rewire it. But it is possible. Yeah. So one of the things that I do is I've had a again, I was speaking from personal experience to, bring the story forward and hopefully help somebody along the way. It's always my hope. For a long time, I've been working probably 9 years with a group called the Hathors. And their energy, I feel them as these yellow, white, gold frequency fields that are feminine, but also moving with sacred geometry, sentient geometry, living light, forms of geometry, the mathematical equations of creation. But there's a mother form, I can just call her Mother Hathor, and I have felt her, was introduced to her, in fact, years ago, maybe it was 2016, picking me up as a little baby. Through my vision, I felt this and like holding me to her chest and actually nursing me as a baby. I wasn't nursed by my birth mother. But in oh yeah, my whole body just lets go into just being held as a baby. I don't think I was held much. I don't have any. Do you guys have like pictures of your mother holding you? I don't have any of that. But anyway, that was one of the really key ways I started to work with attuning with what we could call feelings of goodness. XYZ, you fill in the blank, but like letting myself like fully feel that really does special things in the nervous system for me. But again, it's getting at the subconscious conditioning and letting myself feel safe and loved inside of that has been like so massive. I don't know if I've ever talked, that's sort of like quiet little secret place of healing for me that I still draw upon even now, many years later, when I don't need it as much, but it's still really a sweet zone for me. And I think I came back from Oz, my nervous system was kind of jangly, from what I'd experienced being over there, and then, ended up staying in an Airbnb alone for almost a month, because it was more expensive to book a ticket back than just stay there. It was a beautiful trip in many ways, but of course not what I anticipated. And there's always learnings, even if something isn't what we anticipated it to be, there's still something to be gained, and never, it's not lost. I mean, nothing was lost in there. There was a lot of, I wouldn't be making this video if it hadn't been for all of that. Yeah. That's okay by me. I'm here for the ride. In many ways, I'm masters of the ride. So yeah. So you can see the importance of feeling inside of that. Yeah. It's not, so I want to clarify this with the Hathor, embrace of me as a baby. It's not thinking about it. It is not thinking about it. It's not thinking about it. It's feeling about it. It's closing your eyes, having the visual, and feeling into it deeply. This is a superpower that helps create things. For sure, 100%. For sure. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. And so for me, what was tolerable before, you could tolerate any kind of discomfort forever. That's why I was a gonzo, crazy endurance athlete riding my bike all night through the mountains of, Colorado, and multi-day adventure racing things. Like, I could do this forever, like I could push myself until I'm half dead. Sure, I'm comfortable there. Anyway, what was comfortable before becomes intolerable. And the point being, with relationship, I will no longer be drawn into that which is unbearable in my system ultimately. I will not be a magnet for people who are going to fail to show up for me in that way. I can see the fruit being born in this way already. It's gratifying. High five. High five. It's exciting. Yeah. And I hope you can see, inside our conversation today, the self-care, the self-love, the self-kindness that is emanating, not just, the tenderness with which I've learned to meet myself and my experience, but emanating out from the energy we're holding space for today together. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say too, through my own practice of healing, I've been, yeah, guided into deeper and deeper states of self-love, and feeling loved by the universe, which ironically is like ultimately, what are we looking for in a counterpart relationship, in a twin flame relationship? It is love. But what we can know, and this was delivered to me in meditation a few times so powerfully, it's beyond words, that love is always around us. There's no finite thing that has to just come from one other person for us to feel loved and valued and wanted and worthy and these things. It's always there. It is always there. The sun is always shining. The love is always there. The creation is always being created. It's like this indelible resource we always have access to. It's just reframing our cognition around it and our feeling around it. So it takes us deeper into ourselves, and we feel the cosmos loving us because we realize we are the cosmos. We are that love. This is massive for all of our programming, right? And of course, for me, in coming back from the weaponization of the super soldier program, it's huge. Makes me happy. Yeah, and so we'll do it, like I said, we'll do in just a short while, we'll do a little more experiential with us. Yeah. And also, I did make a companion audio to go with this video and the content within it. It's called, what is it called? Yeah, Galaxy of the Heart, Loving Self-Connection and Divine Union. And it's a healing session, channeled experience. I put it in my store so anybody can access it. You don't have to have a live session with me. It's a fraction of the cost of a live session with me. So that link is below, and it'll take you deeper into some of the, in a guided, really beautiful, restful, healing way into the topics that we're talking about here, and bring you into deeper self-connection and connection with other, and connection with the totality ultimately that you already are. Yeah. Galaxy of the heart of the world, which belongs to us. Yeah. And I wanted to ask if anybody out there has been in a, have you guys done like, it's called a sensory deprivation tank or something. I would never ever call it that. I don't think I've talked about this on the channel, have I? I don't know, for about since March, so probably six, I don't know. I've probably spent 40 hours in a float tank in the dark, naked, floating in space. I love it. It's my happy place. So I do 45-minute IR infrared sauna, and then I have this going on tonight. I have to hurry up and get off. My nurturing day to self-care is coming. But in the float, when I'm there, I always experience the most massive love. It makes me cry. It's just pouring down through me. And it's like, how do I get masses of people to come with me and like experience this? Because it's so healing. And that's the point. I mean, I would say it's a misnomer to call this a sensory deprivation tank, even though you're in the dark and the sound is muted and all of this. I'm actually listening to like space music, ambient space music while I'm there. So it is really like floating in space. And I feel myself going back to the pods on the Light Alliance ship and being healed. That's always also what's happening. Gives me a really direct line to that, like this, like a plasma womb around me or something. Or we could say like a regen tank. This is another analogy, but the loving embrace there is really profound. It's massive. It's so massive. Yes, you can feel that. One more piece of healing that brings us into deeper self-connection is work with the inner child. Do not ever underestimate the power of working with your small parts. Yeah, the small vulnerable parts. And, feel them into right now. Is there a part of you coming up today as you're listening that maybe feels a need, maybe feels a little shaky? And then put that part forward in front of you and kind of just listen to him or her, make space for him or her. What is she feeling? What is he needing? And befriend that part. Welcome it back to you. Integration. Paying attention to ourselves. It's like we could run around the world all day saying, nobody's paying attention to me. Nobody listens to me. Nobody sees me. But are you listening and seeing yourself, right? Yeah. And remembering too that the children really are representatives of the subconscious mind. They're a direct line into the subconscious too. So, and some of the inner child sessions that I do with clients are so powerful and beautiful and loving and, such a kindness inside. Like we can always we can always work on that one-on-one in an IC session. For me, what is the inner child thing? I think in the aftermath of the Aussie guy, what was kind of amplified was like, I will be abandoned, I will be betrayed. It hasn't been, I mean, I've worked a lot on that in the past. So it was just sort of like, it got like sort of agitated, that part. And I kind of have just spent some really good time working with that. Yeah. So I laugh because it is such tender, beautiful work. Yeah. Yeah, and and for me, feeling safe, to feel safe. So I work with all these inner parts and see what they need. And it's not hard work, but we just have to make ourselves kind of present for it. It's not like our go-to. Like nobody says, hey, maybe you should go work with your child part right now when you're feeling upset. Unless you go to like some woo-woo therapist like me. But the inner child work can actually, as you're healing these small parts, and I would say, and I have said before, it's like soul retrieval kind of work. You're bringing in lost parts, period. Very much directly relates to our ability to be in healthy relationship with others, and certainly here, starting here at home. And I wrote down, feel about the new creation. Yeah. And that's kind of goes back to what I was talking about when we were working with the subconscious mind, feeling about it. You're not thinking about it. It's no mentalizing. You're feeling about it and having imagery connected to it and doing it repeatedly that helps us like kind of reprogram. For me, another example I could give is Like, what is that, like a healthy masculine? What does a healthy man actually feel like in my system? Not like, what did Dean feel like, or what does dysfunctional XYZ guy feel like? I know I was talking about the porn addict, I think, in the last video. You guys are going to get a distorted view of what my dating life is like. I really like to bring like the most hardcore examples up to the front. They don't know that I'm going to make a video about that. I'm glad it's humorous and it's not tragic or devastating, because I'm always learning things and I'm always growing, and holding some compassion for all of it, because we all have our stuff, myself and everybody else. Yeah. So feel about, what does, close your eyes. What does, if you're without a partner and you're like, well, so, I'm not asking you to create a fairy tale or a distortion of perfection, because your partner's not going to be like that. They're going to be human. They might be galactic, but they might show up in human form, which will be beautifully imperfect and perfect in that way. But yeah, what does he or she feel like? What are the qualities that you most resonate with, that you most want and need? What does your system need? For me, there's a sense of safety in this man, and someone who can be regulated in their nervous system, able to communicate, able to listen, and able to be present more often than not with a fairly open heart, able to be warm, affectionate, and nurturing, as well as protective. So on and on we could go, and like, you feel about that, feel his energy before you, or her energy, or whatever it is you're visualizing. Keep doing it. Do it every day for 21 days, see what happens. It's changing your energy field. It's changing your field. Yeah, something to all that. And it's deceptively simple to yeah. Did I say letting ourselves love? Seems like a cliche, right? Did I write that down? Letting ourselves love. It's so tender and vulnerable, and like, it seems so obvious and kind of trite. Yeah, like silly. But it's not, considering what we're up against and what we've been up against, and what I've been, what we've all been through, right? Letting ourselves take a chance on ourselves and our own hearts. Like, so important. Yeah, it changes the world. And connecting to other people, just in general. You don't have to leap so far as love, right? But we can say connect. I think most of us, especially in our digital age, and then post-COVID drama thing, um, like, we're just separate at home with our computers. There's no community. We're not in the tribe anymore. We're just out here alone. There's all this, like, people have all this abandonment trauma and the trauma of isolation. Like, how can we connect, and how can we create deeper community? And bring ourselves to the table as we are as humans? There's a vulnerability keynote inside of that as well, bringing me back to, okay, what is Rebecca's awakening course about? It's bringing people together so we can learn together, relate together. And granted, it's on an online platform. That's the best I can do until I figure out how to get people up to Alaska. What's the carrot on the stick? How do I get people to Alaska? Northern Lights tour would be great, but then you're coming and it's like 20 below or 40 below or something. I don't think that would work. Anyway, the Awakening course, if you're interested, would love to have you. We will be gathering in community, and I'm really excited about that. Link is below. And speaking of, so let's move into something I've been kind of like, I get kind of geeked out on certain topics related to space. And in this case, it's the anomalous radioactivity of particularly Xenon 129 on Mars. What the heck? So, speaking of separation consciousness versus unity consciousness, I was looking into John Brandenburg's work he's a former NASA physicist. I think he parted ways with NASA because you know, for obvious reasons. I mean, there's a lot of distortions running the show at NASA, right? Like, enough said. But but I think he parted ways because his science and NASA's views are maybe, you know, divergent. Let's be, just putting it diplomatically. But Was there a nuclear war on Mars? Have you guys dug into this? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, because this corroborates my experience with the Mars reptilians, that there had been 100% those Mars reptilians who picked me up after my craft crashed on patrol, and that whole drama ensued. I've done a video on that, or more than one video about this whole situation in different parts, but they had survived something massive and were living underground, and their genes were degenerate, and that's why they were interested in both my biology and my technology. What are you? Do you have a soul? I lived with them for a while. It didn't go well. They ended up cannibalizing me for parts, meaning taking me apart biologically and technologically, to see if they could use me. But I have really fond memories of them nonetheless. That's like the super speedy soundbite. But Mars always seemed like it was really, really beat up. Um, just this like this play. I mean, in Earth probably seems that way too, but when I was on Mars, it just feels like something was really depleted on Mars, and just like it had been through a war, the planet itself. And I took some notes, Brandenburg's notes. What was he saying here? Yeah, he talks about being a clear radioactive layer on the surface of Mars. And Xenon 129, of course, radioactive and uncommon and anomalous in our solar system, is hyperabundant compared to, for example, Xenon 132, yeah, which is the more common isotope of, xenon in our solar system. Also a hyperabundance of krypton 80, which means it was irradiated with neutrons. Okay, we're getting, this is getting pretty curious. Argon 40, also hyperabundant, 10 times more abundant in the Mars atmosphere. It's radiogenic, the result of the decay of potassium 40. Also thorium. So yeah, he went on in some of his talks to disprove what some people had said was a natural nuclear reactor on Mars hypothesis. He said this isn't true. This can't be true. Xenon 129 comes from nuclear explosions and nuclear testing. He says Xenon 129 on Earth comes from hydrogen bombs exploded in open air. Xenon 129 on Earth comes from hydrogen bombs exploded in open air. Now, why are we finding so much of this on Mars? Was there a nuclear war of some kind on Mars? We could say, my first idea is like, oh, well, were they doing, we could have been doing testing in the programs. They can do, part of the reason why we have these off-planet programs is because you can get away with all kinds of rogue experiments that you're never in 1,100 trillion years going to get away with on Earth, right? Until the human population is gone, and then it's a moot point. The problem with this is that, at least according to John Brandenburg, this all happened 180 million years ago or so, thereabouts. It's a long time ago. It wasn't 100 years ago. So I don't know. In any case, he's deduced, and he's a very intelligent man. He knows what he's talking about. Xenon, krypton, uranium, thorium anomalies there on Mars are consistent with a large nuclear weapons explosion in the past and little else. Yeah, there is, to quote him, there is no natural known process that creates these things. So do we have ETs fighting it out on Mars? I'm sure I will dig into this psychically too, and I think that will give me more information. However, I need to be in a clear space and not kind of forget how I've been front loaded by my own sort of analytical research and wipe my slate clean. Mm. So, and two, we know, I mean, Mars, one thing he said that really got my eye, and it did just, I just went over this in my notes. He said, we know there is water on Mars because of the meteors that come to us from there. What? We know there's water on Mars because of the meteors that come from there. I know this is up for debate, right? Like, is there water on the red planet? I would say, because in the underground oasis that the short reptilians who took me in, the benevolence, they had water. They had water, and it seemed to me that they had created it using the spiritual resonance, the spiritual harmonic that they had evolved with the sentient planet energies, the planetary energies of Mars, just as Earth, are alive. You can relate with them and create what you need. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. That was a little side note in some of Brandenburg's information. Yeah. And we know, with Mars, certainly meteors being tiny by comparison to an asteroid, have an effect on a planet, but not like when we're talking about nuclear explosions, that's massive. It affects the whole planetary system. So I will keep going with that. But yeah, what I do know is that the Mars reptilians that I became familiar with would not have survived from a place of separation. They needed each other and they needed to be in unity to some degree. That's really important, that piece. They needed each other and a strong connection to the planetary consciousness to survive. And we're not different, yeah? So something beautiful and also poetic inside of this. And interestingly, too, the mantids, of course, were living underground. The spiders that I came, those big, big spiders, I did have a clone death experience with one of those spiders, lived underground. We got all this life underground. The bases were largely underground, and it did always seem like I never remember anybody in our training. I mean, we were left out of formal debriefings. We were just guessing what was happening from moment to moment, but but nobody's ever saying, like it's radioactive, everything's hot out there, don't touch anything. I don't know, but we were always wearing like really the suits we were wearing varied over the years, but they had a consciousness to them. Yeah. Um, and we can go into there's a group of beings that come to me to help me in various ways, largely with really beautiful healing. The Nazca being, I call her, although we could say they relate the many relates as the one. So they're coming from a much advanced unified field of consciousness, way beyond the Mars reptilians, who I'm talking about, related in a harmonious way together. But at the upper dimensional levels, I guess we could take the raw material, the Book of One, and Ra, the many speaking through one from our 3D mind perspective. We would say Ra is, a being, but we would say it's many beings operating as a collective. They work as a collective field, and I could see that somewhat in the manta beings on Mars. Had a bit of that, but the higher dimensional beings, like if we're talking about the 10D 12D kind of beings, so they're all just there's one vibrational field that they're within. That's not to say that there's no uniqueness among beings, but it's almost like a body is dispensed with in a way. But the Nazca beings, they're connected to Sirius and the Nazca lines, and they're just tall, luminous, gentle, so dexterous and consummate healers. For me, very much really gentle, gentle, gentle feminine energy. And I feel that they come to me as one mind. I might see that single being, but it's many. I don't know if that makes sense, but it seems relevant in the conversation to bring in sort of these other pieces and examples of what a more unified collective can look like. So we have a frame of reference as we're moving forward. Yeah. And I feel her in float when I'm at the float tanks, maybe tonight. I feel her on my left, and there's this beautiful sort of just kind of talk about states of goodness, pleasure, and ease. Maybe you can feel that conveying. And it's very telepathic. The telepathy sort of arises deep somewhere between my heart and my solar plexus, like this communion and conversation that emits from there. And talk about, we have to feel about it, not think about it. Their entire sentient singular organism, their unified field is feeling. It's all feeling. Thoughts are conveyed through feeling, the energetic componentry of feeling. And feeling that extends beyond the human palette of feeling. It's hard, again, my human language is kind of clunky to describe these things, but maybe you can get some of the energetic vibration, the vibrational frequency and code of that as I'm speaking about it. I hope so. Yeah, and it's very much like in float, and with her with me, other beings show up and so on. It's like letting the universe, the love of the universe, really fill you, will heal you, it'll heal your relationships, and it heals the collective. So something really gorgeous. I hope I can, be transmitting through all of this. Yeah. Yeah. So, I said I would take you through a little, let's just close our eyes here and ask you to be in repose for a few moments, a few minutes. Just letting the thought stream kind of soften. Letting yourself arrive. Maybe it's been a long day, or maybe you're just starting a day, or maybe you feel good or not so good, or some kind of ripple in the inner landscape. If you're human, there usually is. And letting that be, and let that arrive. Let that be here in the space. Let your body soften. Let your shoulders soften and your seat soften. Let your feet kind of feel the earth. Let your breath kind of unwind and do what it wants to do. It might really want to release. I think I've said this in the light language videos. If you want to bring a hand maybe to your chest, that might feel good. Like always a gentle gesture of self-presence. Making contact with yourself is really quite literally making relationship with yourself, and just letting yourself be as you are. This is one of the things that people maybe have trouble with in meditation. They're beginning meditators. I have too many thoughts and I can't control them. And that's okay. You don't need to, and you're human and you will have thoughts. Let them be. Let them be. It's not the thought that's a problem, it's what we do with it that's a problem. Letting your emotions be, letting all the maybe vulnerable parts be here, or whatever it is that maybe you push to the edge because it's uncomfortable. Let that be in the space here. There's room for that. Yeah. And maybe feel held in the space together that we're holding here for each other. There's room for all of you to be here together. Let's see if there's a little bit of relief maybe in that. Feels like maybe you feel relief to be in a safe space together where all of you is welcome and nothing is shut out. Have some breath through that. Just allowing yourself to arrive and be as you are, and something really deep inside unwinds, perhaps. There's space for that here. Feel yourself making room for yourself in your own life, just as you are, not having to change anything. And you being a little softer with yourself for the moment. Abiding maybe in a peaceable space with yourself, a kind of befriending happening. And let that touch your heart. Let your heart be touched. Depending on how you are aligned, you might let the energies from below in the earth rise up to meet you, feeling the loving embrace of the planet. It's been here, and been here, and been here. The wisdom of the planet and its eternal embrace. including yourself in many of your past lives, maybe feeling the embrace and the gifts of those lifetimes. You may also feel through the crown the energies of cosmos kind of pouring down through you, inviting you to glance a second and third time inwardly at who you truly are, what you truly know, because it's bigger than you think. You feel a blanket of sweetness kind of surrounding you, embracing you, inviting you to come further out into the human family, fully sentient, welcoming the sort of messiness of life, messiness of human emotions and relationships. Soften through us and around us. Kind of soften our expectations of ourselves and each other. Maybe to have a scent of equanimity, a little bit of acceptance, maybe a lot of acceptance for that, wafting through on the breeze. What is that like? How does it call you out? How do the elements of the earth and the sky call you out? To be bigger than you thought you could be, to offer more than you thought you could, just because it's already inside of you waiting to be born. You feel that. And let that heart emanation radiate. Receive it fully through the cells of your being, and your body kind of soften as if in the embrace of a lover. Just letting go the holding back and the hanging on, all the limits and fear and the need to control, just letting go. Just for this moment. Feeling the universe come through you, embracing you with love, and welcoming you home. You can bring whatever small part, maybe a child aspect, to yourself now, and let that little one be in the circle of our light today. Might be experiencing quite a bit of many different things as this is opening up energies that will relate with you in a very direct and experiential way. You might feel to offer up whatever in your heart you don't really need anymore and receive what you do need. Maybe the state of pleasure, goodness, and ease. And if it feels right, let that radiate out into local and non-local space, softening the edges, softening the edges, letting yourself melt through the tension. And not really thinking about it, just feeling it. Letting yourself come home. And if someone comes to mind, a situation, a person, an event, a thing from the past, something you're concerned about or wish for in the future, just send that tenderness in the heart to it. And you might feel that up through your collarbones and throat, through the thymus. Yeah, sort of sweetness. And a regulation through your nervous system. So I will leave you with that today. And rest in that as long as it feels good to you. And remember, if you want more of that, you can certainly book a one-on-one session with me, a healing session or a reading, a coaching session, and so on. These links are below. And you can also check out Galaxy of the Heart, Loving Self-Connection, and Divine Union, the audio that is linked below that's in my store. I hope to see some of you in the Awakening course. Yeah, and we're certainly dedicating the journey here today that we made together. Thank you so much for joining me, holding space for this, dedicating it to loving self-connection, and love of the universe being made visible on this planet and writ large across the earth, ending the duality and separation here and returning us to a collective rebirth. Glani lonci belani lonci begata lonci bit Niklani loni vadi vule vanienta ultimealto. Rebecca Rose, Sirius Blue. Thank you for joining me for episode 19. Just to mention this briefly, I have a mother and father from a previous lifetime, indigenous mother and father, and I just call them simply mother and father. They've been with me every day for about 2.5 years. They were my parents from a previous lifetime with the Crow people, and they've helped me heal so much. They've done soul retrieval work for me. They helped me journey to get parts back. And that's actually ongoing. Like even today, I was working with them this morning. And their love is so beautifully unconditional.